Well, hey folks, my name is Brad Martin, and in the fall of 2020, I hiked into the vast forested mountains of Vermont to spend the day metal detecting a property on which, at the time, I believed an 18th century home may have once stood. For the sake of this video, we'll call this property the Pines. As the day went on, I noticed I was not finding the typical items one would find when metal detecting a home. No nails, hinges, utensils, etc. But I did find a horseshoe, a barrel tap key, which at the time I misidentified as a clock winder, 18th century copper coins, and a silver pendant engraved with not only a mysterious piece of artwork, but also a name and a birth date. In the moment, I made the decision to obscure the surname, and I did so in order to protect the privacy of the family that currently owns the Pines, and so kindly granted me permission to be there, metal detect, and film. If the family name engraved on the pendant ever owned the Pines, it may not be impossible through online research or otherwise to discover the location and invite unwanted trespassers. I now know, after nearly 4 months of research, she did not, in fact, live in the Pines or anywhere else in Vermont. Her name was Anna Adams Leonard, and this is her story as best I could uncover.
Over 400 years ago, in a small town in England, a man named John Leonard was born. John was 5 years old when the Mayflower set sail and the Pilgrims landed on Plymouth Rock. He no doubt grew up hearing the tales of their endeavors, and in his early 20s, he himself made the treacherous 2-month voyage across the Atlantic Ocean to begin his new life in the New World. There, he built a home for himself in Springfield, Massachusetts, and spent his life working as a surveyor, maintaining the first highways in the American colonies. In 1675, King Philip's War began. Also known as Metacom's War, this was the Native Americans' last major effort to drive colonists out of New England. John Leonard, at the age of 61, was part of a force reacting to a nearby attack and was killed by a native's arrow through his neck. Between the time of his arrival in the New World and his untimely death, John married a woman named Sarah and fathered 16 children, one of which he named Benjamin. Benjamin Leonard grew to own quite a bit of land as well as an iron mill in Springfield. He married a woman also named Sarah and fathered 13 children, one of which he named Abel. Abel Leonard, still residing in Springfield, lived just long enough to see the first years of the American Revolution, something his grandfather John likely couldn't imagine. Abel married 3 times and fathered 10 children, one of which he named Elijah. Elijah Leonard Sr., like his great-grandfather John before him, participated in battle, this time the American Revolutionary War. Elijah survived, moved north from his ancestral hometown of Springfield to Conway, Massachusetts. There, he married a woman named Anna Adams and fathered 7 children, one of which he named after himself, Elijah Jr. Elijah Leonard Jr., born in Conway, grew to be a skillful architect, assisting on the plans for the famous Faneuil Hall in the Old South Church in Boston. He married a woman named Abigail and fathered 5 children, one of which he named Anna after his mother. Anna Adams Leonard, the name engraved on the silver pendant found in the mountains of Vermont in the year 2020, 226 years after she was born, and roughly 380 years after the Leonard name first arrived in Massachusetts. Anna's story in the historical record is mostly incomplete, but the major milestones of her life and travels can be placed using birth, marriage, and death certificates, as well as U.S. Census reports. Using these, there are a handful of clues that can tell us a little about who she was, where she lived, where she ended up, and how this pendant may have found its way into the Pines. Anna's father, Elijah Jr., received his Master's of Arts degree from Yale in 1788, and 4 years later, he and Abigail settled down to start their family. In the following 9 years, from 1792 to 1801, Anna and her 4 brothers were born. It's likely during this time, Anna's father Elijah frequently traveled east, given his involvement in Boston architecture. It's even possible this is where the silver pendant was purchased. In 1801, the Pittsfield Sun published a notice of unclaimed letters remaining at the post office, one of which was addressed to Anna. The letter's sender and contents is impossible to know, but it's likely Elijah was writing his only daughter while away in Boston. The United States Census for the year 1800 shows what we would expect for Elijah Jr.'s household. 3 boys under the age of 10, as Elijah III has yet to be born, Elijah Jr., Anna under the age of 10, and Abigail. However, the next census, only 10 years later, paints a very different picture. The 1810 census lists Abigail as the head of household, with only 1 child, Anna. It's unclear why the 4 brothers were not counted in the 1810 census. Where were they? With whom were they staying? And why? It is clear, however, why Elijah Jr. was no longer head of household. In 1806, the famous Faneuil Hall in Boston was undergoing a great renovation and expansion, a project Elijah Jr. was working on, a project he would not see the completion of, nor return home from. In January of 1806, at the age of only 38, Elijah Jr. died unexpectedly while working in Boston. The cause of death is not known, but his grave resides in Boston Common. We can tell from marriage records in the years between 1810 and 1820, Anna's brothers started families of their own in the surrounding towns of Massachusetts and New Hampshire. However, Anna's story during this time goes silent. Given Elijah Jr.'s profession and passing, it can be assumed Anna and her mother lived comfortably together in Conway these 10 years, until 1820. 1820 is a census year. The records show Abigail and Anna still living together, but 2 of Anna's brothers have returned. It would seem peculiar why 2 sons, now both over the age of 18, would return to their childhood home to live with their mother. However, later this year, that reason becomes apparent. In October of 1820, at the age of only 46, Anna's mother, Abigail Leonard, dies. Her cause of death is not recorded. However, it seems likely her sons returned home to assist her with an illness for at least several months before her passing. Anna, having lived with her mother for 26 years, is now alone. In the years following Abigail's death in 1820, Anna's story once again goes silent. It isn't until 8 years later when a record bearing her name finally surfaces. One handwritten sentence in a ledger from 1828. This is to certify that Conrad Epley and Anna Leonard have been joined together in matrimony by Mr. Martin Davis, one of the Justice of the Peace in and for the County of Washtenaw, Michigan. Sometime between 1820 and 1828, Anna, as a single woman in her 20s, made the 700-mile journey to the Michigan Territory. There, she married a blacksmith named Conrad Epley and became stepmother to his 5 children from a previous marriage. 2 years later is a census year. In the household of Conrad Epley, we see Anna and her husband, his 5 children from a previous marriage, and Anna's first son, Moses. In the following 5 years, she gives birth to 3 more children, 2 girls and 1 more boy, Mary, Emmeline, and Charles. Anna and her new family lived together in Michigan for the remainder of her life. Here, in 1872, she dies at the age of 77. Despite the records and all they tell us about Anna's life and travels, two substantial questions still remain. Why did she travel all the way from Conway, Massachusetts to the Michigan Territory? And how did her silver pendant get lost to the earth on top of a Vermont mountain? It would seem the solution to both these questions can be found in Abigail's sister, Anna's aunt, Naomi. Naomi Hayden, born 1775, 1 year older than Anna's mother, married and raised a family of 9 children in Conway. The Haydens and Naomi have their own story to tell, but 2 milestones in particular are important to Anna's. The first begins with the end of Naomi's life. In 1839, at the age of 64, Naomi dies in Fowlerville, Michigan, less than 30 miles from where Anna and her husband were married. It cannot be proven, but can be postulated that after the death of Anna's mother in 1820, the single 26-year-old Anna joined the family of her Aunt Naomi and made the long journey together to start a new life and a family of her own. The question of how Anna's silver pendant found its way into the mountains of Vermont can potentially be answered by first taking a closer look at the property on which it was found. As land is purchased and sold over the years, property boundaries shift. The Pines, as it currently exists, is over 100 acres. The area in which the pendant was found was initially chosen to be metal detected due to an 18th century property plot showing a small sliver of land owned by a family of farmers. It was assumed there was once a dwelling here, which proved to be incorrect. Upon further studying of the maps, this property, most likely originally used for crops, was absorbed into a much larger plot around the turn of the century. On the far end of this larger property is a known Stagecoach Inn, a place for travelers to rest when making the voyage over the rugged mountains. Knowing this, it can be assumed Anna stopped here to rest or stay the night, and perhaps this new acquisition of property was used as a gathering place to eat and drink. Whatever the case was, this is where Anna lost her silver pendant. The last remaining piece of the puzzle is why and when Anna was traveling through Vermont. This piece can once again possibly be placed by her Aunt Naomi. It can be assumed Anna had a close bond with her aunt, and in May of 1808, Naomi gave birth to a baby girl in Thetford, Vermont. Perhaps reason enough to make the 100-mile journey north to meet her new cousin and make a few stops along the way. Anna Adams Leonard. Her great-great-great-grandfather traveled from England to be one of the first settlers in Massachusetts. And almost 200 years later, Anna herself becomes one of the first settlers of the Michigan Territory. In between, there were lives, deaths, and countless stories to tell. Every object lost and then found will have an equal number of stories to tell, but it's incredibly rare they're able to be linked directly to their owner and share those stories. The final question is where this pendant should end its journey. With the Leonards, descendants of her brothers in Massachusetts? With the Epleys, descendants of Anna's own children in Michigan? After nearly 150 years and the countless branching of family trees, there are many, many hundreds of living descendants to choose from. Or would it be better served displayed on her grave? Or perhaps a local museum or historical society? The decision has not yet been made, but I look forward to hearing your opinions in the comment section of this video.
I want to thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the story of Anna, her family, and this pendant found in the mountains of Vermont. I'll see you next week.